recently told one of my founders to get on a plane that night, no preparation, just go. He closed the biggest deal of his company's life from a layover on his phone. But here's the thing, if he'd made that same call from his office, it never would have happened. Over 7 years, my co-founder and I have invested in more than 50 tech startups. We've watched them raise millions, hire aggressively, adopt every new tool and framework, and chase growth at all costs. And many of them crashed hard into a million little pieces. But a handful didn't just survive, they've dominated their markets. And what I discovered shocked me, because the founders that succeeded, they ignored conventional advice and did the exact opposite of what everyone told them to do. They rejected the standard startup playbook. They went against every hot take on LinkedIn and every guru on YouTube. They stopped using technology as a crutch. They fired salespeople and started closing deals themselves. They brought people back to the office when everyone said remote work was the future, and they're crushing it. In the next 15 minutes, I'm going to break down the 5 counterintuitive things these founders did that separated them from the companies that failed. And I promise you, at least one of these is going to make you uncomfortable. Let's get hydrated and dive in. The first thing that these successful founders did was they acknowledged that tech had become a crutch and a distraction. All this automated scheduling of meetings, these virtual product demos, AI sales outreach, even their inter-office communications had become automated. All of this was keeping customers, employees, and even co-founders at an arm's distance. It felt antiseptic. It felt divorced from their mission, their goals, even what motivated them. As an organization, they were acting and feeling less human. They were also finding it hard to build strong cultures. All the while, AI was driving marketing, including the messaging, the workflows, and even the analysis. And as good as these tools are, they aren't as thoughtful, strategic, or introspective as the humans themselves. Yeah, they're fast. They keep costs low. But it's the leaf blower problem. Leaf blowers, if you've ever used one, are powerful and they can blow leaves around pretty effectively, but they can also create more mess than they're worth and actually make it harder to get the leaves picked up. Just use a rake sometimes. But like a leaf blower, these powerful technologies can slow down processes when someone doesn't know how to use them properly. All of this tech can be useful, but in moderation and if used strategically. They found that exclusively trying to sell virtually held them back from closing important deals and improving closing rates. This was particularly true for enterprise-sized deals or when the solution was complex or required thoughtful integrations to be successful. They also realized it was a crutch. Many of their salespeople just didn't want to travel or prepare for in-person meetings. Some were even afraid or felt intimidated by the idea of meeting prospects face-to-face. They would try to argue it's cheaper, or they can cover more ground by being Zoom only. I hope you're enjoying the content, and if you are, please consider subscribing to the channel. Back to the episode. As I alluded to in the opening, I recently told a portfolio founder to go and meet with a customer on the West Coast. They booked a ticket for that same evening, got on a plane, and closed potentially the most consequential customer to date in an hour. The crazy part was they ended up doing it over the phone because they got stuck on a layover. But the fact that they were making that effort and showing that drive is what won them that deal. Had they made that call from HQ, I'm not sure would have ever closed. Definitely not within an hour. Another aspect of distracting technology was the rise of remote work. Most of these founders pushed a return to office and found their teams were more successful. This was especially true for sales operations. I don't know why anyone runs remote sales teams anymore who don't cover regional territories in market. It just doesn't work. Productivity is junk. Feedback loops to management, product teams, or customer support from those prospect meetings is non-existent. And it just breeds bad habits and, frankly, laziness. These founders realized the need to build teams and culture outweighed the cost effectiveness and efficiency of remote workforces. It also allowed them to better assess their employees and what they were capable of. They moved people around. They promoted others. Once they stopped listening to the bullshit arguments that the remote employees were more productive or had more success or were able to do everything just as well as being in person, they started bringing people back into the office. And a funny thing happened. Cross-team collaboration improved. Product development was faster because of it. A culture built on accountability was created, and efficiency soared. Can remote work be effective? Of course it can. In certain circumstances and where somebody's output and value can be judged easily against a production and quality standard, it may actually be preferred. But it's important to note that most of these founders adopted a hybrid approach. not a full return to office requirement. They didn't fire people who didn't return, but stopped hiring remote-only employees in all of their customer-facing or accountable roles. Second, they got back to founder-led sales. This deserves a specific call out, as this has been a significant shift in behavior of the last 10 years. It used to be that founders would create these layered and complex sales organizations and quickly take a backseat to whatever sales leadership they hired. But that backfired for most of them. As the cost of sales was too high, there was not the same level of adaptability, and too much coin-operated short-term mentality ran through those sales operations. Salespeople and sales management are expensive. You want to see a 3x or even a 4x multiple on the cost of selling versus the revenue being generated. They are your only profit center. Everything else is a cost center. You need them to generate more money than they cost. Early stage startups have early stage products. They aren't fully baked. They don't solve for every potential sales objection. It takes someone who knows the product and how it works at the molecular level to be effective in the early days of generating revenue. We now see a reversal or a reset among founders that have started to reassert themselves as the de facto head of sales. There are several tangential benefits to founder-led sales outside of more effective revenue generation. This includes faster and more efficient product development, shorter feedback loops around issues, customer service, implementation challenges, and even marketing messages aren't shared secondhand. Rather, the founder is hearing them directly and in real time. This allows them to act quickly to change what needs to be changed and avoid chasing anecdotal feedback from disparate salespeople or disparate sources. By setting this example of prioritizing sales in their leadership role, the whole organization understands the importance of sales in generating revenue. It also allowed founders to push revenue generation as a universal responsibility. Regardless of who anybody was or what their title is, everyone needed to play a role in generating revenue. I had a recent conversation with one of our founders who's lamenting how many deals he still has to close himself. I reminded him that revenue is incredibly important. It's hard to rank anything higher for a founder in an early stage company. He does have time for it, but he'll need the discipline to stop doing things that have little value or high opportunity costs. Because the founder is more effective at selling than many of his inline salespeople, he also generates higher deal value per customer. So while he may be spending 15 hours a week closing sales, pushing them over the top, each of them are worth about $30,000 in annual recurring revenue and under multi-year contracts. Third, these successful founders simplified processes, titles, structure, and product lines. Started focusing on keeping headcount small. This is where they used tech strategically. They hired more slowly. Some even reduced their headcount, realizing they could get just as much done with less people. Part of this was a reduction by attrition, firing underperformers and sometimes even bad actors. Employees who left weren't immediately replaced, as responsibilities were redistributed among the rest of the team. The result was a team that felt more empowered and more in control of their path forward. Many founders started looking for generalists and placing them in leadership roles, moving away from specialists where and when they could. They simply got more value from the generalists than the specialists. They're now running flatter organizations, now knowing they don't need a head of sales when there are only 3 sales reps. They're focusing on core revenue-generating products. It's not that they don't innovate or experiment. They're just very disciplined about dedicating resources for chasing new ideas. More on that in a second. In case any of that seems too vague or too generalized, let me break down my favorite example, Aldi, the grocery store chain. Aldi has no stock rooms. They have no cold storage outside of what's already on the floor, which also means they have no employees needing to stock or restock anything that's on the floor. They reset the floor after closing once a day and only once a day. They only receive 1 delivery of food per day, and the cashiers play kind of a dual role by also unloading deliveries and resetting the store. They sell mostly in-house brands with a money-back guarantee. Eat or use all of any generic item they offer, decide you didn't like it, and return the empty box for a full refund. They don't even employ anyone to chase down shopping carts. You pay a quarter to get one out and get the quarter back when you return the cart. So how's that translated into success? Aldi is the only grocer to outcompete Walmart in Western Europe. Aldi's focus on simplicity, limited product range, streamlined shopping experience, and private labels enables them to generate meaningful revenue and build customer loyalty. They focus relentlessly on the basics and repeatable execution. Fourth, Our successful founders have become obsessed with unit economics. Two things you should never do in a startup: scale a bad process or scale around negative unit economics. In simplest terms, unit economics is what the product you sell costs to produce, market, and sell, and how much money you charge for it. Positive unit economics, you make a profit. Negative unit economics, you don't. Before you laugh thinking that's crazy obvious, Uber loses money on every single UberX rideshare they complete. They added Uber Eats and bolstered Uber Luxury and even charge a premium to schedule rides in the future to offset the losses from UberX. Uber's negative unit economics are a reflection of the blind pursuit of growth, which was largely promoted and pushed by venture capitalists and investors throughout the 2010s and even into the early 2020s. This growing with no regard for profit or unit economics is now sharply out of favor with even Series Seed investors. These founders understand it's okay to do unscalable things for a short period of time. Emphasis on the word short. The most resilient startups in our portfolio are built on solid unit economics. Call it old school or even boomer economics, but that foundation has proven to be a superpower for these founders. This discipline has also allowed them to bootstrap for longer, delay fundraising rounds, which in turn allows them to focus on their core business, gives them more flexibility, and forces capital and spending constraints that create better and more resilient business models. Fifth, these successful founders have adopted some version of the 3 pillars of innovation. I promised I'd circle back to this, and here we are. Think of the 3 pillars as fail fast, fail cheap, fail often. If you experiment or innovate, put a tight timeline on it and set up measurement or success metrics that are also time-bound. That's your fail fast part. This almost guarantees you will fail cheap, provided you don't throw the kitchen sink of people or resources at the experiment. Failing often is where most people screw this up. It sucks to fail, and most experiments will fail if they're ambitious enough. You need to fail a lot to get 1 or 2 wins that have a positive impact to your business. This fail fast, fail cheap, fail often approach allowed them to continue innovating, but they did so in parallel, not in opposition to their core product development, business strategy, and customer retention. So let's bring this home. We've covered 5 principles that separated the winners from the graveyard of failed startups in our portfolio. Technology became a crutch and they put it down. Took back control of sales. They simplified everything. They obsessed over unit economics. And they learned to fail fast, fail cheap, and fail often. But here's what I didn't tell you. These decisions, they were existential. These founders were staring down the barrel of failure. They had runway disappearing, investors backing away, competitors outfunding them 10-1. The easy choice was to keep doing what everybody else was doing, to hide behind Zoom calls, to let salespeople handle the hard conversations, to keep the remote team happy, to chase growth metrics that looked good in a pitch deck but meant nothing for survival. But they didn't. They made the hard call, the unpopular call, the call that made them look old-fashioned or out of touch or even a little bit crazy. And that's the real lesson here. It's not about any individual tactic. It's about being willing to question everything, because the market doesn't care about your comfort. Customers don't care about your excuses, and investors, they definitely don't empathize with your failures. So ask yourself, what are you holding on to right now that's actually holding you back? What would you do differently if you knew your company had 6 months to live? For most startups, that's closer to reality than anyone wants to admit. The founders who survive are the ones who face that truth head on and do something about it. If this video challenged your thinking or gave you even one idea worth implementing, hit the like button, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me which of these 5 hit closest to home for you. I read every single comment, and unless you decide to show your ass in those comments, I respond to them too. I'll see you in the next episode. Until then, go put a dent in the universe.